Imagine it. The year is 1913. A man named Joseph decides to go with a last name that stands for Man of Steel going forward. That man is Joseph Stalin. King George I of Greece is assassinated. Serbia, Romania, and Greece declare war on Bulgaria. The First Balkan War ends. The Young Turks lead a coup d'etat against the Turkish government, and the Grand Vizier is assassinated. South Africa invalidates all marriages that aren't specifically Christian. Speaking of South Africa, here's Gandhi, who was arrested in the same place. Chinese political leader Song Jiaoren was assassinated. China's National Assembly opens, the very first free and democratic parliament in China. The 10 tragic days in Mexico City takes place, during which 3,000 people lose their lives, and the Mexican president is overthrown following a coup d'etat. The New York Armory puts on an art show that showcases Pablo Picasso and Henri Matisse, among others. As many as 5,000 suffragettes go and march in D.C. for the women's right to vote. John D. Rockefeller puts aside $100 million into his foundation, which would be about $3.5 billion today. The Great Flood in Ohio kills 400. The first ever presidential press conference is held. And speaking of presidential, the man to lead us into the Great War is inaugurated. In his speech, Woodrow Wilson says that it is his duty to cleanse, to reconsider, to restore, to correct the evil without impairing the good, to purify and humanize every process of our common life without weakening or sentimentalizing it. A few weeks later, Henry Ford announces the very first automobile assembly line, where he pays his workers well above average in hopes for loyalty and higher quality work. A week later, Woodrow Wilson becomes the first president to physically and directly appeal to Congress when he comes to talk about tariffs. On May 2nd, the United States recognizes the Republic of China. 2 weeks later, despite the protest from the president and the Japanese government, the governor of California passes a law called the Webb Alien Landholding Law, which basically restricts anyone who's Japanese from owning any land. Before the end of May, the 17th Amendment goes into effect, which allows for representatives to be elected in and not appointed in, which has been the process. After the president of Mexico is assassinated, Wilson refuses to accept the new government of Mexico following the coup d'etat. In October, from the White House, Wilson detonates a charge that blows up the Gamboa Dike and makes the Panama Canal officially operational. Before the end of the year, after a roller coaster ride of economy in the past few years, the Federal Reserve Act is passed to give stability to the banking system. The following spring, Mexican officials arrest a group of Marines from the USS Dolphin, and almost immediately they regretted it and let the men go and said, "We are so sorry, we did not mean anything by it." But the admiral of the Dolphin decided that wasn't enough, and he wanted the Mexican soldiers, to salute the American flag. As you might imagine, the president of Mexico wasn't too thrilled about the idea of that, and therefore it led to enough discourse between the two that Wilson sent 2 warships to Tampico Bay. 10 days later, Congress authorizes force to be used in Mexico. Marines end up occupying Veracruz, Mexico, and by July, the president of Mexico resigns. In an effort to work smarter and not harder, the Smith-Lever Act is passed, which gives agriculture education to farmers and students. And on June 28th, the shot heard round the world, Archduke Franz Ferdinand is assassinated in Serbia. And this pretty much is the final straw for all the issues and alliances and treaties going on in Europe. This is essentially the start of the Great War. Here you can see Franz Ferdinand and his wife getting into their car just moments before the shooting. In July, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Then Germany declares war on France, Belgium, and Great Britain. Of course, the U.S. Has a policy of neutrality, and we make it clear we have other things to focus on, such as the Panama Canal actually opening. By the end of September, Wilson establishes the Federal Trade Commission, and then a short time after that, he takes a step further in the antitrust laws, and a new law is created called the Clayton Antitrust Laws, which is even extra restrictions on big corporations. And something else that's been going on for decades is Congress once again creates a bill that makes it illegal for anyone to immigrate to the United States who are illiterate. And once again, the president vetoes it. By the end of January 1915, the very first transcontinental phone call is made by the two men who made the first phone call 39 years prior, Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas Watson. Around the same time, Rocky Mountain National Park is established. And just after Valentine's Day, Nevada implements the Easy Divorce Bill. So in early May, a German U-boat sinks the passenger boat, the Lusitania, off the coast of Ireland. Their reasoning was clearly they were smuggling some weapons, but 1,200 people ended up dying, 114 of which were Americans. And Wilson was still pretty stuck to his neutrality policy, but at this point, Americans, including the administration, were pretty fired up for war. In October, bankers led by J.P. Morgan loan out $500 million to the British and French governments. That'd be the equivalent of about $15.6 billion today. And in December, after decades of squashing the Ku Klux Klan and groups like it, Georgia decides to let them have another go. On a positive note, President Wilson gets married to Edith Bowling, and they go honeymoon in Virginia. Starting off 1916, the Supreme Court sees a case that challenges the new income tax law. But unlike before, income tax law wins. On the Ides of March, General Pershing goes and looks for Pancho Villa across Mexico. And this is after he had been leading raids across the border, so the general wanted him caught. 2 months later, Germany issues the Sussex Pledge, and it's following them sinking another passenger ship called the Sussex, a French ship. And they say, you know what, we promise we won't do that again. At least we won't do it without warning them first. Now, the U.S. didn't say that they're going to get involved yet, but they did pass the National Defense Act this time, which just adds to our numbers of military. A few days later, during a preparedness parade, a bomb goes off. 10 people die immediately and 40 people are wounded. And then that's in San Francisco. And then a short time later in New Jersey, there's another bomb that goes off in an ammunition plant. And of course, Germans are blamed for that one. On August 4th, Denmark and the United States sign a treaty about the Danish West Indies. You may know them as the U.S. Virgin Islands, for $25 million to become part of the United States, which would be about $780 million today. Later on in August, the National Park Service is officially established. And I am unfortunately so sorry, the first time in this series, there was just way too much stuff to talk about in Woodrow Wilson's presidential tenure to pack it into one video. I hate this, but stay tuned for part 2 when we enter the war.